Good evening, everybody. Good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Do you have a really interesting discussion tonight? It's going to be very, very unusual. Let me give you a brief overview of my guest. Francois de Wet, who's got a YouTube channel here called Changing Paradigms, and he started a few small businesses when he was younger. The longest running one being a graphic design printing business for 16 years. Prior to that, he was a technical analyst programmer and did work for military intelligence, analyzing both political and military data in order to make projections in those areas. Part of it was to track enemy movements based on data provided by men in the field during the time of the Rhodesian and Angolan conflicts. Trained in analytical problem solving, so he tends to think very analytically and connecting the dots to see the bigger picture. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Francois has a very unique outlook on South Africa's future, and some consider him a modern-day Signer van Rensburg. Tonight, you're going to find out why. Without any further ado, let me get Signer on the live stream. Hi Francois, how are you?
Hi Scott, well and you, man?
Excellent, excellent, excellent. We've got over 50 people watching and we've just gone live, so we should have a good crew tonight.
Okie dokie.
No.
Yeah, I can't see you, so...
Yeah, no, we can see you fine. It's actually my XSplitter, which kind of steals my camera, so I can actually move across to my camera, which I'm going to now. And people can see me, but you won't see me because that's the way it is.
Okay, that's fine. So I can just hear you. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let you know if we have any issues, but everything is fine.
Okay, 100%. I'll just put the volume up so I can hear you well in the headset.
No problems. Now, please tell me a little bit about your background, and I'm talking specifically when it comes to looking at South Africa's future and where things are going. You have a very unique ability. Can you tell our viewers what that's all about? Okay,
which one specifically? The one with the visions?
Exactly.
Or Yeah. It all began actually in '77, where I began to have visions about South Africa. Now, for a lot of people, that sounds very strange, but I saw the things that led up to 1992, a lot of those things and that. So, it's just a thing that I have, and it's proven to be reasonably accurate over the years, because it's not just been about South Africa. Sometimes it's involved companies exposing sometimes corruption and that kind of thing within companies, and that so sort of a whole long track record of this.
Right. You have your own perception or own views about what's going to happen in South Africa. We'll get to that in a moment. But
okay,
you're also a pastor in real life as well, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. I've been involved in pastoring churches and that kind of thing, yeah.
Right, okay, fantastic. Now, let's get back to the area that is your your focus, and that is what is happening in South Africa and where South Africa is going. Let's first consider the timeline. What do you see as a timeline? I've had other guests on who say that probably within the next 5 to 6 months things are going to go absolutely pear-shaped. What are your views on that?
Very, very much so. I think when one looks at everything combined, one can't look at stuff in isolation. You have to look at, for example, if you take Eskom or SAA or SABC or whatever is happening, all the different parastatals in that.
Yeah.
When you look at the totality of it, you're looking at one major thing, which is debt. They basically have gotten themselves so deep into debt that they have no way of getting out of it. The other side of it is a loss of income. So if you, for example, take Eskom, the municipalities, everything has a knock-on effect. So if the municipalities don't receive money, then the municipalities can't pay Eskom. So which means that it's this knock-on effect. Eskom can't pay suppliers. They can't pay staff. All this kind of stuff in there. And when you look at the total thing in South Africa and you look at everything that's happening, then it spells disaster. Everything that the ANC has proposed up until now is not really doable. It doesn't deal with the core problems, and the core problems is basically the corruption, and then of course the lack of income and the debt problem. So unless they address that, it's like the thing with any business, any good business, the income will exceed the expenses.
Yeah.
And they're not able to fix that. If they don't fix that, if they don't fix the thing with corruption, then it doesn't help what they do on the surface.
Just talking about the corruption side, I'm getting so many reports that what the ANC have done is they've filled the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks with their cadres, their mates. So, this whole Zondo commission that they've got up there, which is supposed to be investigating corruption, is a complete farce. What are your views on that?
Very much. A lot of what we're seeing at the moment is really smokescreens.
Yeah.
I said a while ago, I said that don't think for a moment that state capture is ended. It's still going on. They've managed to sort of expose on the surface a few people, but when you really look at what's happening and what's happening to the money, then it means that the state capture hasn't ended. So all these different commissions that they have, every time I see something like that, I think to myself, okay, what are they hiding? They're too quiet. See?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of it's a lot of basically diversions that are happening. All these commissions. So everybody's now looking at the Zondo Commission and what's happening. And in the meantime, all this looting of funds and everything like that is still going on.
Right. Okay. Now, obviously, with this corruption happening at all levels, including right down to the very bottom of the municipal employees, the money is just being pulled out of the whole government system. And that's creating this huge debt burden. Am I correct in suggesting that?
Just explain again. I don't know if I fully understood.
Okay. With the amount of corruption that's going on at all levels of the government, right down to the lowest levels of the municipality, that's a huge part of the problem when it comes to the debt level.
Oh yes, for sure. If you look at, for example, even just the tax base, they keep on doing these bailouts, but with money that they don't really have, so they constantly look at debt to try and keep things afloat. So if you look at the last while, a lot of these bailouts that they've been getting for the various entities, and that it's not to fix the situation, it is to prevent it from imploding. So basically all it's doing is buying time. It is basically just moving the inevitable on by a month or 2 or 3 months in that. And at a point, they're going to run completely out of resources.
Okay.
If you look at the municipalities, for example, the municipalities it's just deteriorating so rapidly. If you look at our tax base is shrinking the whole time. Unemployment is going up in leaps and bounds. It is. I said a while ago that I think it was sort of towards the end of last year. I said we're going to see unemployment double.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at unemployment figures, you're talking the under 25s, the 18 to 25 group, amongst the blacks, 52% are unemployed already. But now a lot of the whites are also starting to be unemployed. A lot of them are leaving the country and that. So what's happening is you're having a shrinking tax base,
right?
Which is where they want to get their funding from for all these bailouts.
Yeah. Now, just getting back to that municipal situation. With the municipalities, and you're now getting so many groups all over the country protesting and rioting because of lack of service delivery. And really where their anger is focused is at the ANC because of their incompetence and their corruption and everything that they're doing that's wrong.
Yes.
How do you think that's going to end?
Well, the writing's on the wall. I speak about the three parts to basically predicting what's going to happen. So you have past behavior, you have stressors, and then you have an igniter or a catalyst.
Tell us what those are.
And so your predictor is basically past behavior predicts future behavior.
Right.
So when you look at the history of South Africa and you look, even pre-1994, and how things were dealt with, in other words, all the uprisings that we had, and even then destruction of property and everything, if you look at it since then, every time something goes wrong, every time they're not happy with anything and that they burn things, they destroy things, all of that. So yesterday's behavior is the predictor of tomorrow's behavior.
Right.
The stressor is the things like unemployment. So the bigger the need, the more stressful the situation becomes, and people become desperate.
Yeah.
And then all you need is basically just something to ignite it. Like, for example, what happened now with the xenophobic attacks or any, that kind of thing. It just takes a very small flame to set on course a whole sequence of events. Now, up until now, they've been able to curb a lot of the things that have been happening because of the size. So the size has been relatively small, very contained. But now imagine when this happens on a much bigger scale, what will happen then? If you for example take, I think we spoke about it yesterday, when you look at macro that got looted, as part of the thing in Johannesburg. Macro is massive. Now if you look at what was on the media, and you see, it's like it was downplayed, the size of it.
Yeah.
To empty out a macro takes a lot of people.
Right.
So, but the big thing is that this is going to escalate because of unemployment and desperation, and the big one is the fact that the ANC is unable to keep their promises. You see, they're over-promising and not even just under-delivering, but not delivering at all.
Right.
Now the people are starting to get angry. There's a thing with elections as well that people didn't take into account, and that's the number of people that didn't vote.
Right.
Which is 20 million people.
Wow.
Which I speak of the sort of this group of people that are unpredictable, that you don't know about. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And so there's this wild card that nobody knows really what's going to happen.
Right. Now, I need to ask you a couple of questions about this. First of all, regarding xenophobia, a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, says that he's got a family member who's currently involved in protecting the Nigerian embassy in Pretoria from xenophobic attacks. Now, no one has been told about that, but apparently that's happening right now in South Africa. Now, talking about the ANC, do you think that Ramaphosa is a lame duck president because of the fracturing happening within the party? And is that a contributing factor?
What shall I say? I think the whole situation with the ANC is such that there is just not the ability to deal with this, from presidential level all the way down. It's one thing to say a lot of things and to make a lot of promises.
Yeah.
It's another thing to have doable, executable plans to solve it, And so the thing that I'm finding is that the guys they talking. And they make all kinds of claims. They've appointed this commission and they've appointed that commission. And we've seen this again. Like I say, when you look at the past behavior, it's a predictor of future behavior.
Yeah.
If you look at the previous health situation, what happened over there, you look at education. It doesn't matter which sector you're looking at. There's this thing of just a lot of talk, but nothing concrete that is really, really going to solve the problems of South Africa economically, socially, politically, and that they completely incapable of doing it. And then the other side of it is the thing of integrity. Integrity is when people actually mean what they say and do what they say they would do.
Well, I have to ask you on that issue, the National Health Insurance Scheme, the NHI, that they're promising to bring out, and it's going to be this wonderful universal healthcare system. And when you consider the state of the public hospitals and the actual health system in South Africa, it's a complete disgrace. They're not even thinking about pulling their house in order with the public hospitals, but now they're going to bring in this grandiose NHI, which is going to cost hundreds of billions of rand, which they don't have. Do you think that shows a complete lack of understanding at the top of the ANC as to what they're doing?
Throughout, it doesn't matter where you look. In other words, whether it's education or whether it's health or whatever, that is definitely the situation. They don't really understand what the needs are down to the lowest level in those various areas. So the new health insurance thing is not going to work. It's as simple as that. And the reason why I can say it's not going to work is because nothing else that they've done in that has actually worked.
Yeah.
I saw with my own eyes what was happening at the hospitals. The lack of funds, running out of medicine.
Yeah.
Hospitals not paying, for example, for blood tests and that, and the guys not willing to process the blood tests. Doctors not getting paid, nurses not getting paid. Just the general condition within the hospitals, lack of treatment for patients and everything like that. So there's a much deeper problem, and the new health insurance thing is not going to solve those problems. So it's all about getting more money. That's the thing. In other words, every tiny little thing that they execute is in order to get more money because they need avenues to raise funds.
Yeah.
So whether we're really going to see the new health insurance actually unfold and become a reality, I really have my doubts.
Now, just talking about one of those aspects, you mentioned the nurses. My understanding is that the nurses' attitude towards their patients is reprehensible. It's absolutely it's wrong, and there seems to be a terrible lack of training in the current people in education, health, managerial positions in municipalities. No one seems to have the competency to do what they're doing. Isn't that yes. Another factor in why South Africa is failing?
Oh, totally. I mean, you've actually mentioned it on your show as well. This whole thing of BEE, affirmative action, all of that kind of thing. It's one of those things where it's actually come back now to bite them in the backside in a sense, because the lack of service delivery, the state of the hospitals and everything is due to people being appointed on the basis of race instead of competency.
Right.
And so it's a situation that is impossible to sustain. It's just, if you look at what's happening everywhere, even on education, if I can just jump to that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
But now, if you look at the whole thing of education, now the president speaks of, that South Africa wants to be part of the fourth industrial revolution.
Right. Now, Francois, I've just got Marlene said, Your voice is echoing badly. Do you have do you have this playing at the same time as you're talking somewhere in the room?
No,
Okay,
I don't.
okay. Maybe just turn your volume down slightly and just see if that helps.
On which one? On the mic?
Yeah, on the mic, yeah. Okay,
let me just...
Marlena, tell us if this helps at all.
Okay, let me just see if I can find that.
Okay, we've got
I can switch over to... Sorry, I can switch over to a different mic if you want to.
Yeah, try that. We've got over 300 people watching at the moment.
Okay, let me just try this. How's that now?
That sounds great. Okay, sorry, continue with what you were saying there.
Okay. When you look at the... Is it dead enough there? Oh, you'll still see. They speak of the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Right.
But now, what exactly is the Fourth Industrial Revolution? You know, so the Fourth Industrial Revolution...
It's another pie in the sky.
Yeah, we're not even... even the Third Industrial Revolution, we're not really moving in that fully. In other words, we're sort of really just scraping the surface of it.
Right.
You know, it involves things like artificial intelligence, 3D printing, nanotechnology, Internet of Things, in other words, all these different things.
Right.
Now, the Fourth Industrial Revolution is the integration of these technologies. It's, for example, we have nanotechnology with artificial intelligence, you know, we have robotics linked in with the 3D printing, all this kind of stuff converging and communicating with each other and that. Now, if South Africa wants to be part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, like the ANC is promoting the whole time, it's going to take a very, very high level of education.
Right.
Which they're not offering.
Right.
They keep on dropping the standard. 30% for the language of education. So that's why they're dropping out the way they are, because you need a level of skill in the language of education in order to understand the work.
Yeah, don't you think we're actually going back to the Second Industrial Revolution? We're actually going backwards.
It is going backwards, yeah. You see, so it's again, it's all talk. It's political talk.
Yeah.
And it's not doable. They're lowering the standard the whole time. Now, here's the reality of the education problem, is that instead of it picking up and instead of people becoming more educated in that, it is the opposite is happening.
Right.
And so now you're sitting with more and more people dropping out and actually finishing the education. You're sitting with a snowball effect, and that has to do with funding. So students that don't finish and that the loans don't get paid back. So a lot of the student loans, there's no more funding available. The subsidies are drying up to pay for this free education.
Yeah.
And that. So it's this whole thing is perpetuating, and it's becoming increasingly difficult and sustainable, which means the writing is on the wall that this whole education plan is going to implode.
Like
now,
everything
on top
else.
of that, exactly. Now, on top of that, you sit with the thing of where people do become educated, and if they're the wrong skin color, then they can't get employment because there's BE, there's affirmative action, and so. For example, medical doctors that have finished studying and have to be placed to do their year locum, and that wait 7-8 months to be placed, and often, you know, so they leave.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous.
So the whole situation is absolutely ridiculous. You're sitting with people that have the qualifications that are necessary. I mean, we need doctors. And nurses and that kind of thing, and you know, like some of the stories are horrific. You know, if I had to tell you some of them, of just how uneducated some of these medical staff are.
How did they get through?
You know,
by the way, we've got about 350 people watching right now. Now, how did these incompetent medical people become doctors and nurses? Does that reflect the system?
It's basically repetition and then eventually scraping through. You know, that's the thing. In other words, so So they become qualified in that, but it's by repetition.
Right.
And I'm not saying all of them. I've come across the odd doctor in that really have the skills necessary and have worked hard to get where they are. But that should be the criteria. The criteria should be that they must be qualified. They must be able to apply the knowledge that they have, because it doesn't help you have knowledge, but you can't apply the knowledge.
Exactly. Now, something you mentioned a moment ago is money. Now, when South Africa runs out of money, which I think it's very close to doing that right now, how is that going to impact what we're talking about here?
Oh heck, it's going to be a disaster. Everything is linked to each other. That's the problem. So, people tend to look at things in isolation, which you can't do that. Everything affects each other. So for example, at the moment now, what's happening in South Africa is the retail sector is starting to take strain. Because they're taking strain, the business property sector is beginning to take strain.
Right.
Because of that, the building sector, especially when it comes to commercial building, is starting to take strain. I don't know if you saw the last while the amount of people that have lost their jobs just in that sector.
In construction.
So in construction, yeah.
Well, you've got that mafia as well. Group 5, it had to shut down because of the mafia.
That's right.
That claimed 30% of the contract. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. When you look at the shops, like at the moment at the shopping malls, everywhere you're starting to see empty shops.
Right.
And it's going to get worse. As a lot of these shops close in that now, there's a whole story behind that story, because on the one side, there's an overinflated market. So what they did is when our economic growth wasn't as good as it was supposed to be, they just kept on building more buildings, commercial buildings, even though there was not a need for them. So now they sit with too many buildings,
right.
And the amount of, and businesses are closing down. A lot of businesses are closing down, and so now there's this empty office space. Now the big mistake that a lot of guys make is now they need money. So what do? They push the rents up. When they push the rents up, what does that do? It decreases the viability of the shops that are still there, because and then eventually they close down or move out. Right. So we're going to see a major in the future. We're going to see a major move away from the big shopping centers, because the shop owners and that are just not going to be able to afford it anymore. And the only malls in that are going to survive in this financially are the guys that are going to say, listen, you know what, one hand washes the other. We'll basically figure out a way and be willing to lower their rents and everything and make it a survivable situation for everybody.
Right. Now,
the guys that up it and that, it's the same in the shops. In other words, with the price of food and everything like that, there's an exploitation that is happening in the shops when it comes to prices.
Okay, now I have to talk to you about shops. To actually sell something, they actually have to have it delivered to the shop. And one of the other big factors that's happening right now in South Africa is the riots and the protesting on the roads and the shutting off of roads and trucks being burnt and trucks being looted. And we see this every day happening in South Africa. Isn't that going to have a huge impact on delivery of goods to places like Johannesburg?
It definitely will.
So what will that do to inflation in South Africa?
Oh, my goodness. Inflation is going to go through the roof. It's inevitable. When you look at the rand dollar, when you look at there's a lot of manipulating and control.
Yeah.
And that now you add like now this kind of thing where the trucks are burnt and that insurance companies that have to pay out huge amounts of money, insurances that are going up because of it, and that that's why I say everything is connected and everything has a snowball reaction to it. So the trucks being burnt will have an effect on the price of food, because somewhere the cost has to be recovered. Then of course the people that are striking and that want more money, it's like a snake eating its own tail.
Okay, so you basically got a more unemployment, people with less money, and at the same time, everything is costing more. So you've
Yep,
basically got a situation that's going to just collapse, and it's going to
yep.
probably land up in some kind of a civil war. Now, what is your timeline for that collapse to happen, and what do you think is going to be the focus of these warring parties?
Look, I think that the biggest challenge that we're going to face has to do actually with the turn against the ANC. Now, there's some people that will totally disagree with me and say, sort of the ANC is here to stay kind of thing and that. The thing that people must remember is that there's all these promises that's been made, promises of employment, promises of being given land, all these free education. I mean, there's tons of promises that have been made. And the people have been sort of giving the ANC a chance, over and over and over and over. And a lot of the promises that the ANC made is unrealistic. One of the things that I don't agree with is the thing that it's not the job of a government to create jobs. A government is there to basically create the environment for job creation and for businesses to exist and everything like that. Now, we sit with the opposite in South Africa. We're sitting with a situation where you actually get penalized.
BEE.
So exactly. And so, they take the incentives away. I mean, if they had any sense, then they would create incentives where for every person that you employ, you get certain tax deductions and that kind of thing. And that would boost our economy. But they're taxing the businesses to death. It means that the businesses don't really have a viability. A lot of guys have had to cut back on staff, which has increased the unemployment. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is the sector that has had the highest unemployment or loss of employment is actually domestic workers.
Right.
And why? Well, because people have to cut back. They don't have money. Everything is costing more.
Don't you think also Don't you think also the issue with domestic workers is because 99% of home invasions are inside information? People realize that, and they're saying, we're not going to have someone inside who can...
There's a thing of trust. There's a huge thing of trust. In interviews that they've had with a lot of the people around this and that, a huge factor has been just simply affordability, minimum wage.
Right.
Where people say, but I'm sorry, but in that case, I just cannot afford it. So all of these things combined, obviously, it's a domino effect. In other words, it affects everything, and it drags the overall economy, gets dragged down, and eventually there will be recession. There will be all these things happening.
So when do you think that's going to happen?
Well, we're really going to, the turn against the ANC, we're going to see pretty soon. I've said that we're looking at sort of around about December this year, where we're going to start to see the first signs of it. And then next year, it's really going to start featuring more and more. But what's eventually going to happen is where we're going to have this massive uprising, just like we had 1992. See, that's why I say all you have to do is look back in our history and look at the behavior and look at the things that happened then. It's a way of communicating, and so we're going to see that. We're going to see a very sudden uprise against the ANC that's going to be on a national level, and it's going to be very, very big.
What form will that take?
The same as what happened 92. In other words, an uprising against the government, destruction of any property along the way.
The Thule House.
Pretty much that kind of thing. Even municipal offices. Everything that we're seeing right now happening with the destruction of property and that will just escalate. That's just the way it is. And so all we have to do to understand what's going to happen is look around us. The most dangerous thing at the moment to do is to be in denial.
Right.
It's telling a story. Everything that's happening around us is telling a story. And unfortunately, the media downplays it. So there's been a huge lack of information, actually, through the media about a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't realize what's really, really busy happening right under their noses.
Now, we'll get back to that subject in a second, but we right now, here in early October, have a window of opportunity to at least prepare for something like this. And that's called prepping. Now, I know some people in my side chat who are watching don't agree with Satelanders, but I certainly think that at least they offer a plan B, and I'll put their link down below so people, if they want to, they can join Satelanders, and at least then they have a plan B. But let's get back to prepping. Now, we've got this window of opportunity before things fall over. What are the critical things that, if anyone watching this stream right now, we've got over 400 people watching right now, so what should they be doing if they live in South Africa?
The thing with prepping is to understand what's going to happen in South Africa. You see, if you're prepping for a full-on war, for example, that is in reality is something that is extremely difficult to prep for, because you've got all these things that happen that are unpredictable. Right. So to try and predict in a war situation, for example, what's going to happen is near impossible. But when you look at what's really going to be happening in South Africa, it is more a thing of flare-ups. In other words, when you look at what's currently happening, and where we have the xenophobic attacks, and we have all of these and protest actions and burning of property and streets being blocked and all of that. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to see an escalating of that. Right. The thing with this is it's sporadic. It's very sporadic. In other words, so it happens in an area and then it sort of dies down, then it pops up somewhere else, and that. So your prepping for that kind of thing is vastly different. Yeah. And is the kind of prepping that people should really be doing. For example, what happened in two instances is where people couldn't enter and exit the area that they were living in. It's one of these complexes. Yes. And there were protest actions right at the entrance, and this complex only had one entrance exit. And so there's a couple, their children were at school or preschool, and they were inside when this all happened, and they couldn't get out of the complex to go and fetch their kids from preschool. So they had to phone some friends and that. They had to go and fetch the children, take them home with them until things had sort of cleared and that, and then they were able to go. Now, so access routes and all this kind of thing are the kind of things that people need to think about. Right. They need to think, okay, what if I can't get to the shops? What if I can't draw money? There was a situation that happened. It had nothing to do with protests or anything like that, but where one of the main banks in South Africa went down for a day. Okay, I'm not going to mention the bank's name. I happened to bank with him.
I think I know which bank you're talking about.
Yeah, for an entire day, nothing. You couldn't draw money at the ATM. Yeah. You couldn't. I couldn't even go into the bank.
Just on that point. They're talking about banking going digital. Now, digital banking requires electricity. If Eskom falls over, how the heck are you going to do any banking?
Exactly. Okay, now they've got some emergency backup things, and that they reckon that they'll be able to at least sort of keep a basic thing of banking going. But now the ATMs will go down. The banks have already said that. They said that they cannot. It's too expensive for them to run the kind of power supply or backup power supplies and that to keep the ATMs going. So when there's major power loss in that, ATMs are the first thing that's going to go, right? Yes. Which means it's going to have to be through the banks. Yeah. But they'll only be able to keep a certain number of branches open to do that.
Now, so part of prepping should be actually having physical cash or having a supply of silver or gold. It's simple. Something you can trade.
If I can talk a little bit about that. Yeah. You see, when people think of, people talk a lot about cryptocurrencies. They talk about, gold, all this kind of stuff and that. What you have to think about is whatever you put your money into, is do you want it to if there's an emergency situation and you need to get money out quickly, will you be able to convert it or make it into money that you can use?
Yeah.
Right. So that's a big one. Now, if you buy gold, for example, and you buy it as an investment to carry over money when things clear up, because that's a part that I would like to maybe chat to, but at some stage is this what's going to happen over here is going to be temporary. We're going to see the collapse of the ANC, right? And after that, there's going to be a lot of changes that are going to happen in South Africa that are going to be very, very positive changes.
Let's just get back to that point.
But now,
Let's just get back to that point where there's a collapse, okay, and then we'll lead into what you're talking about here. So if you just go back to that point.
What I want to say is basically if you're looking at investments that will carry over money into that time period, then gold, whatever, diamonds, even property even is a good investment, because property will again bounce back, okay. But when you think of a crisis situation, if you take, for example, in Zimbabwe, and you look at what's happening over there, gold is useless in Zimbabwe at the moment. So if you try and you'd have to try and sell it outside of Zimbabwe, which obviously you could do.
Yeah.
But the moment you convert it to cash, and that it depreciates. And so what some people are doing in Zimbabwe is the moment they get money, they convert it into assets in the way of food, tools, oh my goodness, anything that they can trade with.
So basically,
and so a lot of people in Zimbabwe are bartering. That's how they survive, because money, it's not worth keeping the money in your pocket.
You see the same thing happening here in South Africa?
I don't think South Africa is a little bit of a different situation. People say very easily that we're going to go exactly the same way as Zimbabwe. We sit with a very, very different kind of situation over here with foreign investors. We still have a huge business sector, even though it's struggling and it's feeling the pinch in that. And so we're gonna go through a very difficult time.
Right.
I don't want to downplay it, not for one moment, right? But a lot of businesses on that are going to sort of keep head above water. We're going to see a lot of improvising, like they say, a boer maak 'n plan, So we're going to see people come up with brilliant ideas and that of how to get things and that. So the thing that I want to always try to get across to people is don't just see the negative. In other words, see opportunity even in the difficulty. Right. Because that's what's going to pull us through. You see, if we all sort of have this attitude of desperation and everything is going to collapse, then we're basically going to contribute to the collapse.
Gotcha. So getting back to that timeline and where the black population basically turns on the ANC because they haven't delivered on promises. Do you see like some kind of a hypothetical civil war breaking out black on black as being the main combatants? Where do you see it happening?
There's definitely going to be a thing of black on black violence, undoubtedly. We're already starting to see it, with the xenophobic attacks. You see, what one must understand is the guys are unemployed. They don't have food. And there's a level of desperation, and so they need somebody to blame. And so they're lashing out at wherever the politicians are.
I see what you're saying.
Right?
Yeah.
And so as the guys flee from, because I saw that very much, that a lot of people would flee from South Africa up into Africa. Right. Now that in itself is going to trigger war up in Africa. Right, so civil wars, that kind of thing. So the xenophobia over here is going to have a trigger-on effect up into Africa, right? But then the guys, so they blamed the immigrants for the situation because they supposedly are taking jobs and that kind of thing.
Right.
So who are they going to blame next? You see, so the anger will have to shift to someone.
Right, and that's the ANC.
exactly. Now the ANC plays the race card the whole time.
Yes.
As part of our political heritage, if I want to put it like that, in South Africa.
Yeah.
But it's starting to wear through. In other words, if you look at how many of the blacks, for example, are buying into this, it's a very, very small percentage.
Yeah.
What the media shows us is not the real thing. For example, if you take the thing on land,
Yep.
if all the blacks believed that they were going to be given land, why are they buying property?
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that's the only property market at the moment that is very, very active is blacks buying houses. So when you look at, for example, at Lenasia in Johannesburg, and the houses that the people are building over there and building and that, it's a vibrant market. I mean, the estate agents are really having a good time. The prices of the houses are sort of in the region of about 400,000 up to just under $1 million. So why, if they believed that they were going to get all this property for free, then why are they buying property?
Exactly.
You see, it's a faction. It's only a faction. And unfortunately, you have this thing where these are the guys that get the attention in the media, is the guys that make the most noise. And so people perceive that to be the voice of the multitude, but it's not the voice of the multitude. It's the voice of a minority.
Talking about that noise, and the ANC being the next target of, if we can call it black rage, how do you think this will empower Julius Malema and the EFF?
Once again, you're dealing with a group of people. Now, in speaking to some of the EFF supporters and that kind of thing, they're a very diverse group of supporters. It's actually very interesting. You have the guys that basically want to be given everything, and they want land and they want all of this kind of stuff. And then you have the guys that it's almost like they vote for the EFF because they don't want to vote for the ANC anymore. They don't know really, they don't trust the DA. It's a very mixed group of people, and you get very different responses from them when you talk to them. Not everybody wants land in that, and so when you really look, in South Africa at the situation and how they view the EFF and Julius Malema and that. It's a very mixed thing. In other words, his popularity has not really gone up; it's gone down. And the same, for example, with Cyril Ramaphosa, and that when you actually look at the confidence that people have in that, it is slowly declining. You see, and that's what they're going to have to contend with, is this thing of people actually reaching a point where they've just had enough.
Yeah.
And then that's when things are really going to be getting ugly.
Yeah.
And it is not. I think people have to understand. That's why I say with the prepping thing is they have to understand what's really going to be happening. If there's an uprising against the government and against the ANC, then it's not going to be where they're just going to go into people's houses and, for example, kill people and all this kind of stuff. And that it's not that. It's not. It's aimed. That's why I'm saying this whole ploy that they have of blaming the whites for everything, and that the people aren't buying it. It's a small percentage that are buying into that.
Jan van Riebeeck.
And that's one of the things that people need to be very careful of. We very easily generalize, and we say, well, all of these people think like that, or all of these people think like that. I mean, if you just take the whites, for example, and you had to put a whole bunch of whites in a room and ask them their opinion about what's happening in South Africa, you're going to come up with very, very different comments and ideas and that of what should happen.
Now, for the white population, I think most of my people and my subscribers are white. And I think most of the people watching tonight, we've got about 500 people watching tonight, What's your advice to them? You've talked about prepping. What about safety, family safety, children, all these things when things really go wrong? What should they be looking at as options?
That's a big one. It's massive. I mean, it's like, but the two things that we are telling people is you've got to look at doability and sustainability. Mm-hmm. So whatever plan, so there's all these different groups and they all have these different plans. There's bunking in, there's bunking out, there's right. And anything in between. The thing that people have to look at is realistically, how doable is it and how sustainable is it? For example, if everybody goes traipsing off somewhere and where there's no medical services, there's no proper water, there's no proper sanitation, there's no proper food resources and everything, whatever food you take along with you right. is going to run out. Right? You're going to lose your income because when people all go off into an area, they can't work. So, must they take loads and bags of money with them? And where do they go to buy it? Yeah. In other words, how sustainable is it? How isn't one jumping from the pan into the fire with a lot of these things? So what we're telling people is we're saying bunking out is your last option because it comes with so many risks, mm-hmm. right? The biggest thing is to make sure that you, for example, if your access routes are blocked, alternate access routes. If you can't get to your house, where do you go? What if the cell phone services go down? Have a place where you meet. In other words, let's say, for example, a husband and wife get separated or with the kids or anything, they must have 3 places. In other words, option 1, option 2, option 3, a safe place where they can meet.
Right.
It can be friends, it can be family, whatever, but they must. We recommend 3. The thing of cash, water is a critical one.
Just getting back to cash. Getting back to cash. Don't you think when South Africa implodes, that rand that you've got in your pocket in physical cash won't be worth anything. It'll be like Zimbabwe's dollar. Wouldn't it be better to have tiny little silver coins like the threepenny piece, and they're very tradable for little amounts of goods?
It's a very difficult topic, that, because a lot of the deductions that are made about the rand is all based on, for example, Zimbabwean dollar. The rand is one of those currencies, even though it's been detached from gold, and a lot of people will tell you different stories around this, and we had to do a lot of homework and speak to a lot of people to get information and that. Even the Reserve Bank, we battled to get information. There's a whole story why the rand was originally, the pound was detached from gold, and it had to do with depreciation and all this. First the value of gold went up, and so they printed more currency, and then it dropped again, and then there was too much currency, and so it became a whole logistical nightmare to link the gold to the pound and then later the rand. So they undid that. And so what they put in place is basically 10 commodities that form the basis for the rand. So you'll hear some people will tell you the rand is a fiat currency, and other people will tell you, no, it's not. It's a commodity-based currency.
If it's commodity-based, that's very, very good.
Exactly. So now the problem is what affects the rand is its link to the dollar. Mm-hmm. You see, when South Africa was brought back into the whole thing of investments and that post 94, one of the conditions was that the rand have this link with the dollar, right. And there's a whole reason behind that, because it could be manipulated. And so what we have here is a very undervalued rand that's getting played off against the dollar. It's the same as with oil. Where all oil trades in dollars. And so America benefits from that. Every time oil is sold, America gets... Now, it's the same situation. You see, they can increase, decrease, and they would inflate, deflate the rand relative to the dollar and make a lot of money. And there's people that are making a killing.
Yeah, but the gamble is... So the gamble is is the rand a fiat currency, which means it'll be worth diddly squat, or is it a commodity-based currency, which means it'll retain its value?
Exactly. You see now what it's being controlled. So if the rand, due to our economy, or if even sanctions from America or whatever, but where that there's a cut between the dollar and the rand, you could actually have a completely different thing happening. Instead of it collapsing, where it actually stabilizes.
Right.
It's one of those things where you can't make hard and fast predictions about it and say, look, this is how it will be. If the rand if they nationalize, for example, the Reserve Bank, and all of that kind of thing happens, then the rand will definitely collapse. But now the thing is, what do you exchange it for? You see, if you exchange it for example, cryptocurrency. Okay, cryptocurrency's value is determined by real money. Cryptocurrency in itself has no value. Even the cryptocurrency that is linked to, for example, what they call it, the gold bar, or what's it called, something carat. All of those currencies, the amount of gold that's in there and what you pay for it is far higher than to actually just go and buy gold. But, so it's
So
in
you're
a
paying
sense,
a premium.
you're paying a premium. It's network marketing, basically.
And the other thing too is, if you don't have electricity, it's worthless because you can't get to it.
Exactly. Absolutely. You see, so is it a viable option? If you need money quickly, which has now already happened to a lot of people, it's not that easy to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so we know of quite a few people now that have had all kinds of things happen to them, from medical, crisis or whatever, and suddenly needed cash, and they couldn't pay with cryptocurrency because the hospitals don't accept it or anything like that, and ended up with major problems and debt and everything like that, even though they had money invested in cryptocurrency.
So if we can just summarize on the currency side, you're suggesting people should have a stack of banknotes, rand banknotes?
Cash.
Yeah, cash.
Keep cash.
They should have perhaps a bit of silver and a bit of gold looking at post the revolution when things settle down.
You can. Yeah, and property. As crazy as it sounds, a lot of people are, like when this whole expropriation of land thing happened, a lot of people went into total panic mode, and I said, you know what, it's a real threat. Make no mistake.
Right.
And that, but there's a whole story behind the story with the property. I'm surprised that nobody has sort of really come up with something about all this property that the government owns. You see, when the ANC came into power in '94, all the so-called property that had been taken transferred from the National Party to the ANC. They've been sitting on it for over 20 years. Now suddenly they want to expropriate this government land, which they've had all along.
Yeah.
You see, it's a political ploy, but there's a huge amount of legal complexities with. It's not just changing one section in our constitution.
Right.
There's a lot more involved in that. There's 3 different legal systems that basically have to be satisfied in that, and it doesn't satisfy it. Just the thing of property rights. In other words, what is defined as your property. If you paid for something, it is your property, and if they take it, it's theft.
Right.
And that's under your general law. In other words, it's not even under your other laws of commercial laws and that kind of thing. Just normal general law. If you paid for something, it's yours. Right? And so what I said is, people mustn't panic. This thing is still there's going to be massive legal actions in that, even on the national health thing in that. The medical aids and the doctors and that aren't just going to accept it and roll over. There's going to be massive legal actions, and we're already seeing it happen.
Okay, now
so there's going to be a battle that's going to be fought in this area.
Yeah.
The danger
is. I just put? Yeah. Sorry. Carry on with the danger. Yeah.
Land grabs.
Okay. Now,
and that's the one that I warned about.
That's exactly what I wanted to bring the point to, because let's say hypothetically there's this civil war and the ANC government is brought down, and there literally is no government, then everything you're talking about when you talk about, there'll be a civil case, or you go to you can throw that out the window. Because there won't be a government. So what is the best way of handling that situation if you are a white family in South Africa?
In the way of handling assets?
Or just your security. Security, number one.
Your security.
Yeah.
Well, for one, is their strength in numbers.
Right.
One of the biggest problems that we sit with, and it's as old as the hills, and that is we don't know how to stand together. We really don't. And now what's happening is everybody, there's all these different groups, all with their own plan.
Right.
And so everybody's running off in a different direction with a different scheme and everything like that. People need to stand together. People need to, draw together in an area, need to get to know your neighbors, start to work out emergency plans in your area. When to move to execute an emergency plan that involves thousands of people, the logistics around that is enormous. So which means the doability of it becomes a major, major problem. Imagine if people suddenly had to leave the cities. The traffic congestion, my goodness. I mean, exactly. So the smaller groups standing together in areas and they're helping one another becomes a much more doable option and a much more sustainable option. People can share food, they can share resources, they can, that kind of thing. If they need to relocate or move and that, find areas not off way close by. So a lot of people, what they're doing is they're identifying, for example, camping sites and things that are sort of in close proximity in case they need to get out of the cities, that kind of thing. But a huge part of it is going to be assessing the situation. It doesn't help people run into danger.
Right. Now, that's
not going to help anything.
Just on that very point, by the way, we've got well over 500 people watching right now.
Okay.
I was speaking to Hein Marks from the United Liberty Alliance just last week, and as you're probably aware, they're talking about a two-state option. And he raised this very interesting point, and he said basically that when the world recognizes that South Africa is in a state of civil war, what happens is the embassies in South Africa, they send out a notice and say, hey, there's a civil war. At that very point in time, legally, a group of people can actually claim a territory for their own protection. And if they get one country in the UN to support them, they are then a legal, separate state. What are your views on that?
Again, durability, sustainability. Those are the two key things for me.
But legally,
in other words,
is that an option?
When you think of it, I mean, once again, take a whole group of people, relocate them, put them in an area, right? Job creation. Is there a place where they can grow crops, feed cattle? Are there it takes time to build an area into a viable, sustainable area where people can live, like a city or whatever. Okay.
We basically run out of time.
Exactly. So what ends up happening is if people jump for a lot of these options and that, you're actually creating situations that are potentially extremely dangerous. So where people can run out of resources because there is just not the infrastructures and everything that is associated with it, So, it's, I almost want to say the verdict is still out on a lot of these different options and that. I'm not convinced that there is that it's truly doable and sustainable in the long run. Because if you just the sheer size of it, if you had to suddenly take a whole group of people, relocate them into an area, Okay, where's the money going to come from? Where's the resources going to come from? Where, all of these things. Where's it? How's it going to happen? Who's going to build it? With what are they going to build it? Like I say, where are they going to grow the crops? I mean, some of the areas that the guys are identifying, there's a reason why those areas have a low population.
Because they're unsustainable.
Because they're not. Exactly. And so now you want to take a whole bunch of people from sustainable areas, move them into some of these areas and that, and what's going to happen? And these are the questions that people need to ask. One of the things that I really believe is that people need to be extremely sensible in this time. And I almost want to say, test everything, check it out. Don't act emotionally. Don't, because of fear and that kind of thing. First, test it out. Now, I'm not saying for one moment that some of these things aren't, it could not possibly have a viability, but people need to be very cautious. They need to think long term.
Right.
In other words, and a big one is funding, money. In other words, where's it going to come from? If the funding runs out, then you've got a problem. If the food runs out, you've got a problem. If the water runs out, you've got the biggest problem.
Yeah, water is a big one, and so is fuel. Now,
yeah,
think about Orania. Let's just imagine that there's a number of Oranias around South Africa, which are basically self-sustaining. Is that one of the viable options you think that people should look at?
It is a viable option, but my thinking is in terms of something completely different. We keep on looking at our current political system and finding answers in that political system.
Right.
Where I believe that the answer lies in a totally different system of governance.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really believe is going to happen is where our whole political system is going to collapse, not just the ANC.
Do you think that democracy is incompatible with the way of thinking of the people in the ANC?
Democracy is what enables them to be in power.
Yeah, but I mean, are they able to understand it?
Well, yes and no. They understand the benefit of it.
But do they understand how it works? So that's really a key problem. They don't.
No. But the ANC is using the whole concept of democracy to stay in power.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you think realistically, right? If things stay the way they are, in other words, our whole voting system, the way it is, and everything like that, will we end up with a different government? We could end up with a different government, and it could be a black government. It could be the EFF. It could be one of these and that. Would that solve South Africa's problems?
I doubt it.
No. Okay, so the current political system will perpetuate itself. In other words, it will constantly, just by sheer numbers. So what you'll have is the majority will decide for the minority groups. And so as whites, for example, we will be caught in this thing of that's it, no self-governance, nothing like that. Which means that there has to be a completely different form of governance that will give equal say to all population groups in South Africa. That means it can't be democratic in the sense of where the people all vote for a political party. What has to happen is that each group has a representation in the decisions of South Africa on national level, provincial level, even on a regional level, that where everybody has exactly the same say and the same vote. Do you understand what I'm saying? So basically you vote for representatives in those areas, and each group has the same number of representatives, whether it's 5 people or 10 people or whatever, which means that one group cannot outvote or dominate another group. Now, that would also mean that each group could have a form of self-governance. And for me, that's where the answer lies for South Africa, is basically where each group can decide for themselves, on a regional level, on a provincial level, and then jointly come together and decide about national things. There's some things that have to be executed on a more national level, like the laws of the country and all this kind of stuff. And that.
Are you suggesting that you would have like a number of states in South Africa with different communities within them, and then now
you would basically have you would end up with demarcated areas that are sort of run by different groupings and that.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you have to live there to enjoy the benefits of that self-governance.
Right. So it's like a little Europe.
But you still work in the city wherever you are. You still do your job and everything. You don't have to go traipsing off and relocating to a different area. It's not really got to do with that. It's got to do with groups being able to decide about how they want to do things, and things like religion and schooling and all that kind of stuff, and where people can really make sure that they are taken care of.
In a perfect world, that sounds fine, but then you got groups like the economic freedom fighters. I can't see them agreeing to something like that. So how do you handle that situation?
The thing that I believe is going to happen is that we're going to have an implosion. We're going to have an implosion of the ANC. We're going to have an implosion of the political system. And things are going to become pretty bad in South Africa. It doesn't help to, whitewash it or whatever. That's the writing is on the wall, right? And at a point, we're going to sit with a system that is totally collapsed, and that will make way for different governance and that kind of thing to happen. And that's pretty much what I saw in the future of South Africa is a takeover, basically, and new proposals being made, new agreements being made, and that. But the road that I saw there is a rough road. It's a very bumpy road, and it's going to take a while for this whole thing to work out. People are going to follow people that have solutions,
right?
Not because they're a political party. And it's going to turn things inside out and upside down. And the time is going to come again where a lot of these people that have been moved out of jobs on the basis of skin color and that are going to be needed and be given the opportunity, because it's going to be about saving a nation. But by then there will have been major clashes between black on black. It's a difficult thing for me to say in that, but the people that are going to be the hardest hit by what's going to happen economically in South Africa is really going to be the blacks. And for a lot of different reasons, the education thing, the understanding of how an economy works.
I think starvation and disease.
Exactly.
And disease are going to be huge.
Yeah. So what you're going to find is that I'm not saying for one moment that the whites are going to have it easy, not for one moment. But I think that in comparison to one another, I think the whites are actually going to be doing reasonably okay.
Well, they'll be better prepared.
They'll be better off, yeah. Even now, if you look at the unemployment figures, I mean, we're talking, like I said, under 25, 18 to 25, 52%, a total unemployment rate in South Africa of around 37%. The total unemployment rate amongst the blacks, nobody knows. The guess is that it's somewhere in the region of about 42, 43%. We battle to get those stats. Amongst whites, 6 to 8%.
Yeah. Now, I've just got a question here that Angela's asked, so I'm just going to get that out of the way, and then we'll get back to what we're talking about. She says, what should we do with our funds? Offshore, gold, or what? Please ask Francois.
Okay. If you're going to move your money offshore, then make sure that you move it into a commodity-based currency. And I would stay away from fiat currencies, because this is again the thing of connecting the dots. You see, when you look at what's happening on globally, and you look at America, you look at the trade wars, you look at Europe, with the thing that's happening with China and everything like that, the whole world economy is unstable. And so you could literally move your money from from one bad thing into an even worse thing. This whole trade war thing that is happening, and with America, and the things that are happening in Europe with Brexit and all of this kind of stuff, is all going to have major effects on investments and all this kind of thing. I mean, it's not a thing of if it happens; it's a thing of when it happens.
So really,
there's constant talk of economic collapse and investments and that. So if you move your money, look for countries that basically have a very strong commodity-based currency, and that's what a lot of people. This is in conversations that I've had with some guys that have actually done this. If you want to move your money, if you want to take money through this difficult period, then look at commodities that have some value. I know it's like gold, that kind of thing, and that. But if you're going to need quick cash, don't.
Now, just talking about that particular point, what you're saying in effect is if the rand is based on commodity, then just keep it in physical banknotes or cash. Now, how do we find out what the rand is actually based on then? Because that's the elephant in the room.
Well, they list the commodities. I can't remember now all of them. I know iron is one of them, platinum is another one, property is another one. Of course, gold, diamonds, silver. I can't remember. There's 10 identified commodities. So the only thing is that they're not directly linked. Like it used to be with the gold, but I don't think anywhere in the world I'm actually not 100% sure. Most currencies that are not fiat currencies are linked to assets, but it's not direct linking to assets.
Right. It's just the assets in the country.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, if you think of it, South Africa is actually a very mineral-rich country.
Yeah.
Water is a problem, and that but we actually have a tremendous amount of resources. It just has to be in the right hands.
Right. Now, if we can get back to where we were at, I hope that answers your question, Angela. If we can get back to where we were at, and we're talking about post this apocalypse, where the government collapses. Now, you're staying in, let's say, Sandton with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we know about South Africa today is that the South African police service has completely lost control of the gangs. I mean, if you look at the Cape, you look at Gauteng, you look at even in Durban area, there are gangs that roam the streets and no one ever gets arrested. Now, what about those guys? Once the government disappears, aren't they just going to recruit people and go and attack areas in the cities because they know they're easy pickings?
There's going to be a lot happening. You basically end up when the kind of thing happens that what happens in South Africa, you end up with anarchy. It's inevitable. There's nothing you can do to stop it, and so part of a new form of governance will be a completely different way of policing. You're part of the problem. The current political system just perpetuates all the crime and all the corruption and everything like that. The corruption in the police force, it doesn't take it away. The only thing that would take it away is a complete implosion. That's why I say to people, the collapse of the ANC is a cloud with a silver lining. In other words, if we want change in South Africa, this is a road that we've got to walk. And there is no other way, unfortunately. But a lot depends on how we handle things and what we do when we come out of this. I really believe, and there's a thing of like I've said, I have visions sometimes, and I get shown things by God and that, and I saw a new form of government that actually was so strong and so stable that people were coming from other countries to actually come and stay over here.
Right.
Now, when you tell people that, they say impossible, it can't happen. And yet, I honestly believe that is what's going to happen. Once we get through this, we're going to see a major turn. We're going to see a new government system. We're going to see a different way of doing business. People are going to want to invest in South Africa. A lot of people are going to come back that immigrated, are going to come back to South Africa and help rebuild South Africa. And South Africa and even Africa is actually going to become a place of refuge.
Right.
Because realistically, all over the world, things are pretty tense. I mean, it doesn't matter where you look. I mean, Europe is I mean, look at the migration crisis that they got in Europe. Exactly. And so a lot is going to be happening on a global level. And we're going to find a lot of movement. We're already seeing it. We're going to see people move from this area to that area to move out of danger and that kind of stuff and it's in the long run, it's actually going to benefit South Africa. So what we're going to find is we're going to find these people coming here with skills at a time when South Africa is really down and out.
Now, what's the timeline for that?
And that's a thing that's very difficult to determine. I can't say with 100% certainty, but I have a hunch that we're probably not going to have another election, that this election was the last one. That the next election is going to be not really doable because of the situation in South Africa.
Right.
So then we're going to go through a period where it's almost like we're not going to have governance.
It'll just be anarchy.
It will just be anarchy in that. And then that will pave the way for a new government to emerge. Okay, now, what I saw in one of these visions was I saw two coup d'etats, two totally different coup d'etats. The one was to basically try and, or I almost want to say redo apartheid. In other words, where, that sort of style of governance.
Right.
But that it's not going to work. In other words, that there's going to be just too much resistance from everybody in South Africa, and that it's just literally going to pop its head up and then disappear, and also that they're not going to be what they seem. I know it's that there's going to be an agenda, okay, but I saw a takeover of government where the guys literally walked in because there was nobody governing, and literally walked in and said, well, somebody's got to do the job, and walk in. And in this case, I saw whites walk in and do this. And the thing is, they came with a proposal that it was all inclusive, and that made it a thing that everybody was quite keen with it. And that is the turning point. So that's why I always tell people, I said, right now we're facing major things in South Africa.
We're at a tipping point.
But it's going to change. This whole thing, it's a time period that we're going through. The unfortunate thing that I don't know is how long it's going to take. It could drag on. It could take, another 5 or 10 years. I don't know. What I do know is that a lot of business and that is going to carry on,
right?
Because that's life. It's like, people think when all these things happening that everything comes to a grinding halt. It doesn't. When you even take World War II and you take all of this, people were trading.
Yeah.
There were shops. There were, you know what I'm saying? In the midst often of absolute catastrophe, it's amazing the resilience that people have and how life sort of finds a way to adapt and to carry on. And so we're going to see that in South Africa.
Now, talking about when this country collapses into anarchy, what will the international community do? I mean, let's take the United States of America. Will they come in and or the UN come in and have a group that come in and try and sort things out?
Some countries are going to come and help in that, but with an ulterior motive. It's going to be about their money,
like the USA.
So that's what makes our situation different to Zimbabwe. There's just too much money invested in South Africa for the guys to just walk away.
What about China?
So China is a definite. I cannot put it, like a challenge for South Africa. But China is facing its own things. In other words, this trade war with America, the whole thing that's happening in the Middle East and that Russia and all of that, it's a melting pot that's heading for also for a major catastrophe.
Yeah.
And so China is trying to find alternate markets and that, and buy into South Africa and that. But when the things really get bad over here, a lot of these guys are going to leave.
I actually think,
because it's just not going to be worth it for them. In other words, it's like so as quick as they came in here to try and make investments, they're just going to pull the investments out because they lose money, and also because of, for example, xenophobia and that kind of thing.
But can I just disagree with you on something here?
You may, of course.
I think the Chinese, because they do have now substantial assets in South Africa, I think they'll bring in their army. They could bring in one division and they could clean up the South African army in one day flat. And I believe that they'll come in and they will just, on that basis, suggest that they're going to protect assets and then basically take over South Africa. You don't think so?
No. The reason why I don't think so is because they're not the only guys that have a interest in South Africa. There's America, there's Europe, there's Germany, Switzerland, Sweden. There's all these different countries that all have major vested interest. Right. If the Chinese had to walk in here and try and take over in that, it's all about money.
Yeah. So you think the US would respond?
They would trigger a war. They would literally it would be like inviting a war onto themselves and that, and they know it. So whatever they're going to do will be very subtle. Like they're doing now. In other words, where they give loans in order to have control, and that, so it'll be much more subtle. It'll be in that kind of thing. But remember, it's all, at the end of the day, it's all about money. And so, if there's no money in it, then it won't last. The other thing is, when you think in terms of survival in South Africa. Having some of these guys come in and offer solutions, let's say, for example, electricity and that. So let's say, for example, China had to come here and with an alternate to supply electricity and it keeps us going, then is it a bad thing necessarily? It depends how you look at it. If it means that it pulls us through and it keeps our economy going, then it means that, it's almost like they were useful. It just depends. It depends how one looks at the various things. But a lot of people are worried that China will, for example, take over South Africa and that kind of thing. I really don't believe that that is going to happen. It's not what I saw in those visions at all. What I saw was a turn in our economy, a major turn. A lot of people coming here, investing in South Africa. And South Africa's economy actually becoming a very, very strong economy, a force to be reckoned with globally.
So the only real unknown in the way you see things happening, we're talking about your visions here, is the timeline. Now, talking about the timeline. All right, let's say I'm living in Johannesburg and I've got a family with 2 kids. I'm a typical white family. How do I survive that timeline if it's 5 years or 10 years in a state of anarchy?
Okay. The big thing is basically to keep going. Not to crawl into a corner and just give up. Already a lot of people have lost their jobs, and because of BEE and affirmative action. The big mistake that people make is they look at their qualification and they try and find employment in their qualification. In times like this, you don't look at your qualification. If you can find work in your qualification, fine. And that it's about ability. What are you able to do? Most whites are multi-skilled. So what we're suggesting is that people look at alternate ways to generate income. When it comes to economy, we're going to have to get back again to the basics of economy. And the basics of an economy is supply and demand. What do people need? And what can we supply in the way of services, in the way of products, that kind of thing. For example, for shops, what we're advising shops to do is think carefully what you want to stock. Because when money is tight, people are not going to buy luxury items. They're going to buy necessities. So rather have the necessities, the things that are important, especially if it can be stuff that is very reasonably priced and can be an alternative for the very expensive things and that. Those are the guys that are going to make the money. So that's pretty much what we're telling people is we say, think of abilities. What is it that you're able to do? And just get out there and do it. And we've got numerous letters from people from all over that have told us their stories of how they've done this and how it's actually saved their behinds, because there's cases where the guys did it before they actually became unemployed and had something to fall back on. The big thing is not to think that basically, okay, now there's nothing I can do. And almost have this fatalistic kind of thinking. Yeah. And then, of course, the safety factor. This, people need to think safe. They need to think how they move. They need to think in way of food, water, that kind of thing.
Fuel.
But the thing that we really believe is that a lot of the things are going to be very sporadic. In other words, it's, we were in Joburg when this other thing happened about a month ago. We happened to go through, and we were literally down the street from where the xenophobia attacks were happening. A lot of people didn't know it.
Yeah.
It was down the street, but they didn't know it was happening.
It's crazy.
So, and that's pretty much how life is going to be. It's not going to be, when we say our economy is going to collapse, it's going to be very much on a higher level, if I want to put it like that. One of the things you'll hear me talk about a lot is this thing of a sub-economy. And so what I really believe is going to happen is that there's going to be a sub-economy that's going to develop in South Africa. It's already happening. When I began to share about this, I started to get emails from people, and they said, "You have no idea what's happening." And there's all these connections. There's all these things that are happening under the radar, and that is. SARS even acknowledged that they know that there's a lot of these things happening because obviously the people aren't paying tax because it's mostly done in cash.
Yeah.
But it's busy happening.
Just turning back a bit to when anarchy breaks out in South Africa, there's one huge elephant in the room, and that is tribalism. You've got this very large Zulu tribe, you've got the Xhosa tribe. They don't particularly like each other. If you look historically back to the 1800s, there were huge wars that they had against each other. Don't you think that's going to have a huge part of this anarchy stage where they just take each other on?
Absolutely. Remember what I said earlier? I said that at the moment now they're looking for somebody to blame. They cross, they're frustrated, they're desperate, and so they just target. They use the opportunity to loot. So the looting thing is here. It's going to be here for a while, for quite a long time, and it's going to escalate, right? But it's going to shift. You see, when a lot of the immigrants over here are going to leave, they're going to go back up into Africa, and then now who are we going to blame? And so when people are desperate, people turn on each other. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see major tribalism. But what I saw over here, again, was not a full-out tribal war that was happening. It was more these flare-ups and happening all over. And every time a flare-up happened, major destruction of property. It's one of the things that I saw numerous times, and that is a lot of damage to property.
Yeah.
And when I say property, not really residential property, more if there's damage to residential property, it's going to be much more in smaller places, where they almost run out of options to something to burn. But it's going to be more things like municipal offices, even hospitals, clinics, police offices, all of this. The the people that they blame for the problems that they're having, that's going to be the target. And so there's going to be major power struggles. The land grab thing, not the land expropriation thing. People moving into lands is going to cause territorial clashes. And it's already, the writing is on the wall. When you look at what's happening in Rhodesia, for example, there's all these guys that have bought houses over there. Like the one guy put it, he said, we moved out of the township. He says, and now the township's on our doorstep. You see now, it's tension. It means there's this major tension. And obviously that's going to cause problems and it's going to cause clashes. Anger has to pop out somewhere. When people are angry and frustrated, and that they're going to find somebody to vent it at, and obviously there's groupings that are where it's going to be black against white, and even white against black. You see, when you have groups that are very protective over their rights and are willing to fight for it, then inevitably it leads to bloodshed. And it's one of the things that people need to remember the whole time. People talk so easily of war. We're ready to go to war, that kind of thing. But, do they really know what it's like?
Yeah. Well,
sometimes I actually told somebody, I said, do you think you're not going to be shot?
Yeah. You know what I found quite tragic was I lived in Greytown in the 1970s, and my mother was the PA to the mayor in Greytown, and that's up in KwaZulu-Natal, the northern part. And not far from us was the Jigela River, where all the Zulus had their little villages. And they used to have faction fights, mainly over December, where you'd have one little village, the men had a problem with the other village. In the middle of the night, they'd go out with their pangas and their knobkerries, and they'd basically kill everybody in the other village. There were still Zulu people, Zulus in both villages. And December appears to be a very, very violent time when you look at people they're going home. And could that be the point that you're talking about, where the wheels just start coming off?
I think so. I think it's December is a time of celebration. It's a time where people drink a lot. It's a time where the reality of their financial situation and that sort of really kicks in, and they see other people celebrating and having things and that which just increases this level of desperation and frustration. So but this December it's really just going to be sort of a thing that emerges, shows its head, and then it goes down again. It's what's going to happen next year, and the build-up. That's going to be the thing. This was going to give us some idea of what to expect.
Right.
But you see, when you're talking of a national uprising, I tell people, imagine what happened in 92, and multiply it by 10 or 20 times.
Right.
That gives you an idea of basically, remember the marches that we had in the streets and everything, and the damage of property that went with it and everything against the National Party. We're going to see that against the ANC, but on a far bigger scale than what we've ever witnessed.
Yeah. Now, just for those who've joined the video or the live stream, thank you for being part of our discussion and the side chat. And I'm going to ask Melina and Ria if they can just cut and paste questions shortly. And Michelle, if you could do that too. But, what we're talking about here is Francois' vision of what's going to happen in South Africa. And Francois gets these visions, and, he's basically presenting to us what he sees is going to happen in South Africa. So this is based on his perception and his visions. All right, so if my moderators can just post any questions in there, and we'll certainly take those. Okay, so while we're waiting for that, what do you think the most critical thing that Ramaphosa could do right now to try and stem what you see happening?
to stop the tide of what's happening.
To stop where South Africa's going.
Is to face the reality of what is happening, the corruption and everything, and do everything in their power to root out the corruption where there's consequence. What's happening now is there's all these, this commission and that commission and everything, but we're not really seeing anybody really being taken to task or even being jailed for what they've done.
Yeah. Now, do you think that's likely, considering that Ace Magashula and David Mabuso, his deputy, are probably two of the most corrupt people in the ANC? I mean, it's right through the whole organization.
That's the thing. It's not doable. You see, they won't do that. Yeah. That's why I say the whole thing of looting of we look at the looting of the shops.
Yeah.
There's looting been going on. That's part of what the state capture is of all parastatals, municipalities and everything. They're basically being looted. They take the money out into all kinds of things through all kinds of means and that. And the problem is it hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
And the ANC doesn't know how to stop it, just like they don't know how to stop the crime. They're just incapable of stopping the crime. In other words, there's too many factors involved in it. The unemployment is a major catalyst for crime. And unless jobs can increase and that kind of thing, then it won't happen. But now the problem is that the approach to it is completely wrong. You see, part of the problem with Eskom and why they're sitting with the problem that they have there is that they're overstaffed.
Right.
And the reason why they're overstaffed is they used Eskom to create jobs.
Well, they've got something like 16,000 too many staff at Eskom. And
exactly,
because of Kusato, Ramaphosa won't get rid of them because that's his power base. Now
Eskom's not the only one. You see, that's the problem. Yeah, you see, so the mines, all over, they're sitting with this situation. The municipalities overemployed, they and incompetent. So they're not supplying the services. People aren't paying. That kind of thing. So it is all a ticking time bomb. I sometimes get quite frustrated because I can't understand that people can't see what's really happening.
Well,
I find it. I think how's it possible that people can be in such denial about what's really happening in our country?
Yeah. Well, Marikana is just about to retrench 5,000 miners.
That's right, and it's going to happen fast. We're going to see now into 2020. We're going to see even the latter part of this year. it's already happening, but 2020 it's going to be a culling of jobs. Even the unions are going to start to basically, there's going to be strikes and that against it and everything, which is going to cause even less money to keep people employed, and it's eventually going to reach a point where they're just going to have to retrench people whether they like it or not. It's going to be a matter of survival, and the unions will have to acknowledge it, and there's nothing they'll be able to do about it.
And that's just going to add the anger against the ANC. Exactly.
And so these are all the things that are just going to culminate. I speak of a convergence of things, and all these things are it's being squeezed down into a point where it's becoming extremely volatile, and where the tiniest little thing will just ignite major problems in South Africa.
So just to summarize where you see South Africa going in the next 6 months, is that there's going to be a lot of violence happening over December. Early next year, you're going to see the ANC basically being the target of the attack of a growing number of black people. And then there's going to be anarchy, and then no government, and there's going to be a period of time, we don't know what that time is, where things will just be chaotic. And that's a time that people have got to prep and survive for. Is that a simple summary of it?
It's pretty much it, yeah. I think a lot of people have sort of pointed out, and they've said, about that we're technically are actually in a war.
Yeah.
When you look at, since '94, I mean, 500,000 people have died, and we're not talking about accidents and that kind of thing. We're talking directly related to crime and violence. 500,000.
Right.
When you look at, for example, what's happening in the Cape Flats and that area, and the gang warfares and the amount of people that are dying over there, I mean, that is horrific. When you look at, for example, the trucks and the stats on that, and how many trucks are being destroyed in that, sometimes up to 60 over one weekend.
Crazy.
Now, we don't see that really in the media. So when you look at all of this, there's this build up that's slowly but surely starting to happen. More and more incidents that are starting to happen. The media is downplaying a lot of this stuff because they don't want to cause panic.
Yeah.
But now here's the crazy part: is some areas have been unaffected by it,
and they don't know what's going on.
So you can't even blame them for saying, but it's fine. There's nothing happening. And other areas, again, have been repetitively affected by it, and people have had to really prep and are really living in the reality of what is busy happening. Now obviously this is going to spread, and that. But I think the big thing that I want to leave with people is the thing of that this is as bad as what it is. This is going to lead to a turnaround,
something better,
and something better, and then we're going to look back and say, wow, okay, this is far better than what we had and what we even imagined possible. Now obviously, I'm not going to tell people that in itself is not going to have its own challenges. Obviously it's going to have challenges. Nothing is perfect. But in comparison with where we've been, and that is going to be a totally different ball game, and once a different way of thinking and economy and that kicks in, and that it sort of perpetuates and it grows and it just increases. Once all the right things are in place. Now, obviously, you have challenges and everything, but if the infrastructure is correct, then it will grow. It's as simple as that. If you think of Rwanda up in Africa and you look at where they came from and you look at where they are today.
Yeah, it's quite a good economy now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The way they clean, it's beautiful, it's clean, they take pride in their country. It shows that it can be done.
Yeah.
But if you spoke to the average Rwandan a number of years back, they would have told you it's impossible, can't happen.
Yeah. Now, Angela's asked another question. She says, what will happen with funds in South African banks?
I think, look, it's very difficult, that kind of thing, to sort of really make any kind of predictions around that, because you're sitting with so many different possibilities that could happen. So right now, what I tell people is just don't do anything, don't panic, don't start to do things that you haven't thought out very carefully and that. And so if the ANC, for example, nationalizes the Reserve Bank and they start doing that kind of stuff, then clearly we'll have to start thinking of exactly what are we going to do with our money and where we're going to put our money. And we'll have to see what alternatives come up with. One of the things that I really believe, even as far as the medical things are concerned, and that is that there's going to be a lot of, how can I put it, people finding loopholes and putting new things in place. And that, for example, medical infrastructures and that. The guys are just, if this door closes, they're just going to open another door over here. And the same's going to happen even with the area of money and banking and all this kind of stuff. The guys will devise their own systems, their own way of trading and that. So it's one of those things that we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out and what alternatives develop. But there are going to be alternatives. So if the banks run into trouble and there's this nationalizing that takes place, I take you a bet. It's a the guys they'll figure out a way.
Right. just for the record, we reached 600 people watching a short while ago. Now, if there are any other questions, I would like to ask you, while we're just checking to see if there are any other questions from those watching, is there anything that you would like to say to the viewers who are watching this and people who will be watching the live stream later once it's archived and still on my channel? Is there a message you'd like to give to people?
I think the big thing, I mean, on the one side, I've got the whole thing of, being a pastor, and obviously that is central to for me as a person, is my faith in God, and the fact that, God always, when you look at history and you look at the Old Testament, for example, and God's dealing with Israel, God never just said, okay, this is what's going to happen, this is the end, and basically there's nothing you can do about it. With every setback, with everything that happened, there was always the promise of an alternative and something better evolving out of that. And so when you look at history, I mean, it doesn't matter, even whether you want to look biblically or not biblically. Let's take World War I, World War II, you take the Boer Wars over here and everything, and you look at what came out of that. I mean, if you think of the destruction of World War II, and you look at how out of that what happened, history has a way of sort of repeating itself, over and over, and that. It
does, yes.
And for me, it's a thing of I believe, people tend to think of God as a genie, almost like they expect God to wave a wand and bang, the whole situation in South Africa is solved. It doesn't work like that. He uses nation against nation, groups against groups. In other words, he has his own way of dealing with the kind of situations that we sit here. And sometimes it takes a long time. And we get frustrated and restless and scared and all of this because we think almost that he's lost control. In the meantime, he hasn't lost control. He's able to steer nations. The Bible says that he can raise a nation in a day, or a leader in a day, and bring it down in a day, and we see that in history. Now, it's the same thing with South Africa, it's the same thing with Europe, it's the same thing with America. It doesn't matter where you look. With everything, there's something more behind it. A thing of I always tell people, God's whole nature is redemptive and restorative, and that, and so. It's not a thing of where he almost wants to basically just wipe out mankind. That's not his heart. His heart is for us to have enough, to be taken care of, to be healthy, all this kind of thing. That's why he's given. We all have gifts. We all have abilities. That's why we have doctors. Why we have all these technologies and all this kind of stuff. Mankind is designed to thrive and to grow and to be blessed, and that poverty was never part of the plan. Having people in dire straits and that. So for me, that is very much sort of how I look at the things. I believe very much in a God that loves, and when we reject that, then obviously there's consequence. And when we do things in a way that is unjust, and that, like in South Africa, what do you expect? If there's corruption and all of this, it leads to other things. In other words, a system falling apart, and that it cannot work. Yeah. Because it's selfish. It's everybody that's involved in it is doing it just for their own gain. They don't care about South Africa. They don't care about the people of South Africa. As long as they can line their pockets,
which is what they're doing,
they're okay with it. Exactly.
Now, Jack has asked. Ask, what are your personal thoughts on the prophecies of Oom Syne van Rensburg?
It always comes up somewhere.
I'll leave you to respond to that. I just need to go to the little boy's room.
Okay. Okay, so it's a very difficult question to answer. And the reason why is because any prophecy is often very much what do they call it, a beeldspraak. In other words, it's figurative. In other words, it's not literal. And so a lot of the prophecies of Syne van Rensburg are open for interpretation. And so many different guys have tried to interpret them. He himself apparently admitted that many of the things he didn't know what they meant and that. There's a lot of things between his prophecies and my prophecies that seem to correspond, even though I have never read any of his stuff and that. And so, it's one of those things where a prophet is proven by whether the things happen or not. Now, with Senior von Rensburg, I'm just talking about hearsay. I'm talking what people have told me. Apparently, something like 60% of his prophecies have already come to pass, which for me is sort of a thing of, well, maybe one should take note of it. Are prophets always right? Most definitely not. In other words, the Bible says prophets know in part and prophesy in part. So even, I think there's a danger in lifting up somebody to a point where they're almost infallible and every single thing that they say is definite and there can't be any error in it. Now, if some people will get angry at me for saying that, but I believe everything needs to be tested. Then there's, of course, the scripture and whether it lines up with the word of God and the way that God works in that. So it's a very difficult one to answer that. I think there's a lot of things that people can take note of. But like I say, the danger is in the interpretation.
Sorry, I'm back.
I know that's fine. A lot of people read a lot of things into the prophecies of Senior von Rensburg. In other words, that he actually, didn't literally say. And there's quite a number of those. I'm not really an expert on Senior von Rensburg, so I can't really speak for all the things in that. I've sort of avoided his stuff for the simple reason that I didn't want to be influenced by his prophecies and almost like become a second voice for Senior von Rensburg. So the only connection that there's been has been the fact that a lot of people have said that a lot of my stuff seems to line up with his.
Right. Okay. I missed most of that, but now, guys, look, there are about 550 watching at the moment. It's getting later in South Africa, so the viewers are starting to drop off.
Okay.
Are there any further questions people would like to ask? And while you're doing that, I just want to thank you so much, Francois, for being part of the live stream.
My pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. We've covered a lot of ground.
And,
I'll be watching with interest to see what happens in the next 6 months in South Africa, and we'll see whether your visions actually come to reality.
Yeah. I always tell people there's a lot of pressure that goes with this.
Yeah. All right. Now, Anne's asked, Zimbabwe, what is its future?
Zimbabwe?
Yeah, Zimbabwe. What's going to happen there?
Zimbabwe, along with Africa, is in for is a major rough time. The xenophobia wars and that we're seeing here is going to sweep up into Africa, and so most of the countries up in Africa are going to experience some form of tribal wars. The economy of Zimbabwe, it will only be restored when and a lot of people don't like the terminology that I use, but I'm going to use it in any case. There's going to be a recolonizing of Africa, but not in the same manner as what happened way back. I know there's going to be a whole different agenda, and Africa, including Zimbabwe and these countries, and there's going to be people coming in that are going to rebuild Africa after all this stuff has happened. The only country that I saw, is sort of in the lower part of Africa that skipped a lot of this tribalism, and that is Namibia. And there's a reason behind that, and that is that Namibia is going to be a route of supply to South Africa in a time when the infrastructures over here are sort of battling to cope and even non-existent. So there's going to be this route that's going to be through Namibia of supplies coming into South Africa and that, and Namibia will have some problems, but not on the same level as the rest of Africa. So even with Zimbabwe's situation is going to stay the same until the time comes where they welcome back people that will come and rebuild Zimbabwe.
Do you think they'll want to come back?
I think eventually people are going to come to Africa because of what's happening up in Europe and those places.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I think because of the melting pot and all the things happening there, there's going to be this shifting of people. So where now South Africa is the hot spot, in other words, where things are really, really going to go bad, but the timing is going to be perfect. In other words, as we pull through this, then the things are going to get really bad in Europe and that, and so a lot of people are going to, just like we saw people leave South Africa, people are going to leave Europe and they're going to come here. And when they come here, they're going to come with skills, also even with resources and that kind of stuff, and we're going to see a major rebuilding of initially first South Africa and then moving it up into Africa. And Africa is going to actually become a place of refuge for the rest of the world.
Okay, now, so what you're saying in effect is that South Africa is like a test case of what Europe's going to go through. Now, just talking about that,
pretty much.
What do you think of the influence of people like George Soros and the Open Societies Foundation in South Africa, and the role that it's played in how South Africa is just imploding?
Oh, major. When anything that happens in a country, doesn't matter which country you look at, you always have the guys with the bucks, the guys with the influence that pull the strings and that, and you think that certain people are in control and that, and when you actually go deeper in that, there's other people behind it pulling the strings and that, and South Africa is no exception. There's no doubt about it that there's other role players that are involved in a lot of the things that are happening over here, emerging of leaders suddenly, funding that comes from, a lot of the stuff now, if you look at that, it's all got to do with money and where the money came from.
Yeah.
And so, it's crazy that some of these guys will fund 3 political parties.
You know what I found very disturbing was that Open Societies Foundation, when Thabo Mbeki was president, 3 of their senior staff were appointed into Thabo Mbeki's advising committee directly from the Open Society Foundation. Now, I have a question here from Truth, Lies and Deceit. He says, what will happen to our pension fund when the country collapses? And Karina added to that, what about pensions such as disability?
It's one that I wish I had an answer. A lot of people are sitting with this one. If they, let's be realistic. Whatever loans they take from the pension funds and that, look, the same thing happened with the National Party. During the time when there were all the sanctions and everything, they borrowed money from the pension funds and that, but they paid them back. In other words, the pension funds actually benefited from what happened. The track record of the ANC when it comes to that kind of thing tells you if they take the money, it's never going to come back. It's that simple. And so for most South Africans, their pension funds are really, really at risk, major risk. And unfortunately, I don't have a solution. What I have said to some people, or if you're close to retirement, or if sort of watch the situation, and if it gets to the point where it becomes a very definite where they are going to take the pension funds, if you're able to have your pension fund paid out and then rather take the money and invest it somewhere else, then do it while you can get it out, and also not wait too long. But if they go ahead with this one, then there are going to be losses for sure. I think most people, especially when you come to our age, and that where there's only a few years until retirement, and that it is really a major one that everybody has to contend with. And like I say, unfortunately, I don't have a very definite answer to that one. If we could take our pension money out now, we would, but unfortunately we can't.
There's a very good argument that the NHI, or the National Health Insurance Scheme, has only been proposed because they will then be able to loot all the private health funds out of them and be able to take those as well.
That's right. It's all about getting money. See, that's the thing that people need to realize. This whole NHI thing is a ploy again to get hold of funds. You see, the National Party, not National Party, the ANC has run out of options to get more money. They sort of reached tax limits. There's so much that they can do, and so they've got to try and find other avenues. So they're looking at all kinds of options. They're looking at increasing VAT again to get more money, because now they keep on promising bailouts to keep things afloat. Eskom has been given numerous times now emergency funding that just literally slips under the radar, and that's so that they don't default on their loan repayments. That's how bad it's got. And NHI is a way to get money, but now come on, let's look at the track record of the ANC. Does the money ever reach the things that it's supposed to be used for? No, it doesn't. And so it's not going to be any different with the NHI. It's again that thing that I said, yesterday's behavior is tomorrow's behavior. There's just no way that the new health insurance thing is going to materialize into what they say it's going to be. It's just simply going to be used as a thing to get money.
Yeah. Now, just for those who've just joined the live stream, thank you for being part of it. And just so you're aware, we covered a whole range of subjects leading right up to when Francois sees South Africa imploding, how it will implode, what you should do to prepare for that, how you can safeguard your family. There's a huge amount of information in here. And once again, just to be totally clear, this channel doesn't necessarily endorse everything that's said, but we love giving people a platform to share their point of view. That's why we call it Real People, because Francois is a real person. He's a very smart man. He's an analyst. He's quite a unique personality, and I've been absolutely delighted that we've had him on here today to just share his views and comments. And I just want to say to those in the side chat, thank you so much for participating and putting your comments. Lucy's just asked one question here, and she says, is Francois talking 5 to 10 years from now? Yes, next year if it will begin, but how many will survive?
Look, one of the things that I saw was not really a thing of, where they go out and they start to cull people. The biggest challenge that we're going to sit with in South Africa is going to be damage to property. And that is obviously going to have a huge effect, There's some guys that sort of almost you almost get this impression that, suddenly there's going to be this invasion of blacks into the streets, just wiping out the whites and all this kind of stuff. It's not going to happen like that. In 94 with the elections, pre-elections, a lot of people believed that we would have civil war. And at the time, I was putting people's minds at ease and saying there won't be a civil war, not now. And even now, what I saw was not civil war in the sense of we're going to be declared a nation at war. And there's a reason behind that. That is so that certain defense mechanisms can come into place for the whites over here, but not just for the whites, for other minority groups and that as well. And so, and so we're going to be this nation at war as such, but it's not going to be in the true sense of the word, where there's going to be this major civil war that's going to be going on in South Africa. It's going to be this flare-up of things the whole time, and some are going to be worse than others. But the main thing that I saw was property being burnt. Huge amounts of property being damaged and burnt by fire. So, you know, I'm not saying that there won't be casualties. You know, and even in the uprising against black and that there will be casualties, but even there, it's not going to be a full-scale war. It is going to be a thing of sporadic flare-ups, and that will sort of die out again, and that, but the overall effect, the totality of it is going to have a major effect on our economy that is already very fragile. So I don't know if that sort of sums it up. You know, it's difficult to, so it's not war.
Now let me ask you a question. What happened to the Rainbow Nation?
Come again? What happened to it?
What happened to the Rainbow Nation? Yeah.
Well, and the Rainbow Nation is not a realistic what do you call it, ideology or vision.
Is that because of the people who run the government?
Well, every group has its own, I mean, that's why, I mean, if you look on a global level, there's racial tension developing all over.
Yeah.
You know, so the whole concept of, what do they call it, you know, where everybody just lives happily together, and that is not really, even biblically, you don't even find that. You know, Israel in the Bible lived by a set of values, and that clashed with the values of the nations around them, and they protected it. You know, so you know, it's not realistic to think that you can sort of put everybody in a melting pot together and sort of stir it together and think that will work. No, if you don't have a system that basically protects the identity of a group, then it will never work. And the thing is, it's not what it did over here. I mean, look at you know, all the policies and the over 200 laws that they have restricting whites and employment of whites and all this kind of stuff. You know, so now is it wrong for us to want to defend our right to how we want to school, religion, how we want to discipline our children, all this kind of stuff, and that? No, you know, it doesn't matter which religion you look at. People are going to defend that. They're going to want to defend that right to educate their children in the ways that they believe is right. You know, so a lot of these things are pie in the sky. They just not really doable. You know, I think even in the framework of church, for example, I mean, church is a place where you find that a lot of people from different walks of life all come together and they're united in faith. But part of the thing of even that is a respecter of the person. You know, you can't want to take everything and squeeze it into like one mold, where everybody thinks the same, acts the same, dresses the same, all that kind of stuff. It'll never work, you know. Yeah. And so, you know, I think in order like to do a thing like a Rainbow Nation, and that you end up with people giving up their identity in a big way.
So it was doomed to fail. Now I've got another question from Shell. She says, please ask Francois if he believes that there will be places that are safer and less vulnerable to volatility and flare-ups.
Oh, yes. Oh, for sure.
Like where?
The problem is I don't know. When I had the vision of the fires that spread through South Africa, it started down in the Western Cape area, and then it moved up into Free State, KwaZulu-Natal, and then eventually up here Gauteng area, and that. So it sort of and that. But even then, it was flare-ups. It was flames, and then smaller flames from that, and then they flared up again. And but there were areas that were for some other reason, it just didn't really go there. Now, I don't know if it's because of the composition of the people and ratio of black and white or other groups and that. I don't know. I have no idea. But there were areas that's why I said it's a very difficult thing to describe, where I saw all this stuff happening and yet life carried on, and there were areas that definitely seemed to be unaffected by it. So that's why when it comes to prepping and that, I tell people, just think carefully. If you go running off into the bush somewhere and live in a tent, and it was a flare-up that lasted a week.
Right. No,
is it realistic to do that? Is it, or have you just actually put yourself in jeopardy? The other thing is, now you leave your property. If everybody leaves their properties, what do they think is going to happen?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? In other words, so for me, the whole time, is there are these areas, and we'll be able to see them. It will be clearly identifiable, because all you have to do is follow where these outbreaks of the fire is. And you'll clearly see, now already you can see where the hotspots are. And there are areas that definitely, if you think of it, I've spoken to some people in that, and I've asked them, even the farmers, the thing with the farm murders. I wanted to know from some of the farmers, in other words, how things are going in their areas, right? There are areas where the farm murder thing has just not happened.
Yeah. You got hotspots like the Northern Cape.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that we'd have to, that people need to look at realistically, and that, and sort of identify the areas and that. But now at the same time, if everybody runs off to those areas, then will that cause problems? I don't know. Like we've got the thing now. Yeah, we're in Gauteng now, where we've got a lot of people coming this way for work. Up to, I can't remember the stats now, but I think it's some months it's over 10,000 people that are moving towards the Tshwane Gauteng region, and obviously it's putting a major strain on the water supply, electricity supply, all that kind of stuff. There's just not the infrastructure and expansion to go along with the amount of people. And so when people suddenly relocate to an area, you can actually have that in itself creates problems.
Right. Now I'm going to just give you one last question, then we're going to wrap this up. And it's from Dagbreker, and he's written, which of the programs or algorithms has stood the test of eons? Christianity has proven most true, but it has been traced back to ancient Babylon. Could this show the way?
Sure, I'm trying to understand the question. I think just repeat it again.
Sure. Which of the programs or algorithms has stood the test of eons? Christianity, and I think he's talking about the philosophy of Christianity, basically, has proven most true, but it has been traced back to ancient Babylon. Could this show the way?
Sure. It's a very difficult one to, because I'm not even sure I really understand the question. When you look at all the different systems and religious systems and that have been in place, including Babylon and that, every single one of them collapsed. Every single one. Okay. Christianity is very different in that it has to do with an internal reality and allegiance, if I want to put it like that, to a God that we believe is the God. Okay. And so when Jesus was on the earth, he was not a social reformer, he was not a political reformer, he never stood up against the Roman Empire. In fact, it was only later on in history that we sort of found that the guys had these, what do you call it, where they took the gospel by force into areas and that. But in essence, Christianity is not a by force thing. It is to do with an internal reality of God, a set of values that people live by that has to do with respecting one another, and that in the Bible it says, in Christ there's no Jew, no Greek, no slave, no free, no male, no female. In other words, that we're all equal before God. And that is why Christianity can work. It's the only system that can work. When you look in Acts, that it speaks about, I think it's in Acts 4, where it says everybody, jointly supplied to each other, and says those that had lands and everything came and laid it at the apostles' feet, and they distributed to everyone according that had need, and that, and says there wasn't one needy person among them, but it was voluntary. It wasn't socialism. It was a thing where people cared enough about one another to share what they had. And the thing is, it's not a system. That's what makes it so unique. It's not implementing a system with a bunch of rules or anything like that. It has to do with a relationship with a God that cares about people, and the outworking of that. Practically through giving, through kindness, through helping one another, all that kind of stuff. And that is why to this day, when there's need, the people turn to the churches for help.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the situation here now in South Africa as well. They know that the churches won't look the other way, because in essence, that is one of the values of Christianity, is to give and to help fellow man.
Okay, fantastic. Listen, guys, once again, thank you so much for being part of the live stream and joining us, and thank you so much for the moderators. You've done a fantastic job. Malina, you played a huge role in getting Francois here on live. Thank you for your work. And finally, Francois, thank you so much. It's been a very interesting and informative evening, and we'll certainly on this channel be watching your predictions closely. And it'll be fascinating to see what does happen. And I really believe that when you say there's a positive ending to all this, and this probably had to happen to get rid of the stuff that's happening in South Africa right now, probably means that there will be a positive outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, thanks, guys. I'm going to shut down the channel now. And please have a safe evening and have a good evening. And I hope you found tonight informative. I certainly have. All right.
And thank you, Scott, for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
man.